Kia ora and welcome to the You Be the Judge podcast show. My name is Witty Timoni. Today, our guest is David Suich. He is a near-death experience researcher and certified spiritual counselor. He has researched over 1,200 near-death experiences over the past 14 years, and his NDE book is called God Took My Clothes. Thank you for being our guest and welcome to the You Be the Judge podcast show, David.
Thank you, Witty. It's a pleasure to be here on your show today.
Awesome. Okay, can you tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do and your journey so far and how you became an NDE researcher?
Sure. I was a raised Catholic and then I was a Christian most of my adult life. And around about 1999, I came down with chronic tendonitis. It started in my hands, my arms, it moved to my jaw, my feet, and it became really a debilitating illness. The doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. And it got to the point where it was so bad that I couldn't be on my feet for more than 10 or 20 minutes. I'd be in pain. And I was using a mobility scooter for 3 years. And of course, after a long journey, I'm miraculously healed, and now I'm walking, 8 kilometers 3 times a week with my wife, and my body's healed up, which has been wonderful. But during that time, I saw no end to it. I became very depressed, and I had been prayed for by hundreds of people, dozens of churches, and I came to a very painful conclusion. And that conclusion was that one of two things is happening. Either there is no God, or more likely, there's a God, but I'm not a good Christian. I'm not a good person, so I'm out of his favor. I'm the son he's embarrassed of, And that was a painful conclusion. And it was during that time I was out of work for a few weeks because I had the tendonitis throughout my body, and if I was laying down too long or sitting up too long, different parts hurt, so I would go back and forth. And I clicked on a YouTube video. It's about a man who he was an atheist. He had a near-death experience. It was a negative near-death experience. He called out to heaven for help and was rescued. And he seemed pretty sincere. I was trained in my job as a salesman on how to spot a lie. And this guy had none of the signs of a person who's lying. And so I began to investigate near-death experiences, and it just started the ball rolling. And then I decided to write a book about it. And at the time I wrote my book, I heard over 700 near-death experiences. Here it is now. I've been doing it for around 14 years, and I've heard, I stopped counting at the time of my book, but if I had to estimate, it's probably around 1,000 or 1,200 near-death experiences. So being a retired engineer now, I spend a lot of my spare time just talking about it and counseling people who have had a near-death experience or out-of-body experience or going through a spiritual awakening. It can be a difficult time in life, and so I enjoy doing that. And I'm continuing my near-death experience research. And it's just something I really enjoy doing. So it's my favorite subject to talk about. So I've lost my fear of death, as do many of the people who have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. They lose their fears of death as well. So that's how I got started. And it's almost like a full-time job these days. And I especially enjoy counseling people because some of these people, they have no connection with the world of spirituality. So one of my clients, for instance, was an Orthodox Jew, and he had a near-death experience. And he's like, I can't tell anybody in the synagogue or my family about this. They're going to think I'm crazy. Another lady was a doctor, and she, was kind of an atheist and didn't believe in any spiritual stuff and started having out-of-body experiences, and it was freaking her out. And so, I was able to calm her down and say, no, this is perfectly normal. It happens to a lot of people. And, So yeah, I really enjoy the work now.
Now, you've got a book called God Took My Clothes. Can you?
Yes, here it is.
There it is right there. Can you explain a little bit about your book and why you called it that?
Sure. Before we get into that, though, probably being there in New Zealand, a lot of your listeners, I don't think my book's available there. I don't think you can get it there. Now, the publisher owns the rights to it, so I can't give it away, but I can give away the unpublished version, which is almost identical. So if somebody wants it, they can send an email to book@godtookmyclothes.com. Again, that's book@godtookmyclothes.com, and I'll send you a free PDF. We're all here for each other's encouragement, understanding, and love. It's not all about making a buck or making a profit. So The book is called that. It was kind of an interesting story. I was writing the book and I didn't know what to call it. And I was out to lunch with a friend of mine who was an atheist. And, he tolerated me talking about all this spirituality stuff. So, he was all into guns, and I tolerated him talking about guns, so we had a good relationship. And I said, I don't know what to call it. He said, God took my clothes. Now, that made no sense to him, but it made sense to me, because the very first experience I heard, and I put the man's testimony, the video testimony I heard is transcribed in the book, in the chapter on hell. It was about a 20-minute video testimony I saw on YouTube. And he was in a hellish environment, and in the afterlife, thoughts are things. So if you think you have certain clothing on, you will have that clothing. Well, in his hellish environment, he had his clothing torn off. And so he was nude the whole time. And even when he called out to help to heaven, he was nude the whole time. He was really embarrassed about it, and he was with Jesus and 7 or 8 angels, and they tried to get him to calm down. They're like, well, and the idea is like, well, when you see a naked dog, do you think something else? Well, no, that's just how a dog looks. Well, this is how a human looks. You can just relax. So the whole time he was naked. And that's actually pretty common, that people who have hellish NDEs can often describe, being naked in that environment. Yeah. So that's how it got its name. And he had no idea that it would fit. So I think that was divinely inspired.
Are there any common things that are shared from people who have had NDEs?
Common experiences, yes. So there are a lot of common elements, but it's important to note that every near-death experience is different, because heaven creates an environment that makes us feel comfortable. So if a person is, a big fan of nature, they're going to be brought into one of heaven's beautiful gardens. If a person, it was really close to their grandmother who died, raised by their grandmother, something like that, their grandmother's probably going to be the one to meet them. There was even one man who was a very religious man, and he had been a big fan of the Apostle Peter. So when he got to heaven, guess who met him? Peter met him, who he said was a bit shaggy looking. So they'll often appear to us as they appeared on earth. So the Apostle Peter was a bit shaggy looking, which I thought was funny. So there are a lot of common elements. The most common near-death experience is somebody dying at the scene of an accident or in the hospital. And they come out of their body. They see their body from above. And some of them are confused. Most people are pretty calm. And then they're revived and they go back into their body. So that is by far the most common experience. Now, if they have a longer near-death experience, and it's important to note here, when I say a longer near-death experience, I'm not talking about in terms of Earth. There is no time in the afterlife. So a person can be dead only a minute and have a near-death experience that, if they were to put it in temporal terms, would last a month or a year or even a lifetime. So if the experience is more extensive, they will sort of notice something off to the side or behind them, and they will see a pinpoint of light, and they will start to move towards this light. They get pulled to it like a magnet. Now, some people at that point are told by this light, it is not your time to die, go back, and they go back to their bodies. And the ones who have more extensive near-death experiences come into this light. Now, again, this isn't everybody, this is just what's common. And they describe the light as being brighter than 10,000 suns, not at all harmful to the eyes. They describe a love that is so powerful and intense that even the word love is completely inadequate to describe it. They say things like, imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life and put them all into one moment, you still don't come close. One guy said, imagine the strongest love you've ever felt in your life and multiply it by about 500, and that's what it feels like to be there. And so people will sometimes cry. They talk about it like it's the best experience of their life, and they get very frustrated, some of them, because they can't describe it in human words. That's how different it is. It's this unconditional love, a feeling of safety, of peace, of joy, of knowing everything. You think about something and the answer comes. And they describe it, it's like the everything of life is to experience that light, and they get to it and they just can't describe it in human words. And they get frustrated. Some of them get frustrated, and others say, it can't be described, but it was so beautiful, I'm never going to stop trying to describe it. Now, some people have a discussion with this light. They don't have to be told that it's God. The universe reverberates his name. I mean, when you're standing in this light, there's no question in your mind, this is the creator. And it's kind of interesting. People report this isn't a new experience. They say it's familiar. They say, I'm coming home. Oh, yes, this is my true home. This is where I came from. So a lot of religions believe in the afterlife, but fewer people and fewer religions believe in a pre-life. Well, we are all facets of the divine creation. We're part of all that is. And when people are in this light, they recognize it. They recognize I'm a part of that God. I was a piece of it pretending to be human. So it's quite a revelation, when the little human being who thinks he or she is nothing stands before this amazing being and then realizes I am that being, so it's quite a shock, but it's such a beautiful experience. And some people have what's called a life review, where they go through their entire life from beginning to end. Now, it's not like living another 80 or 85 years over again. It happens very fast. They say it's instantaneous. Again, there's no time in heaven. Some people call it a panoramic life review. And when they talk about things, they say there's no order to the events, which of course doesn't make sense to us living in a world dominated by time, but that's what they say. They say we have what happened yesterday and we have what's happening right now, and then we have what's going to happen tomorrow, but in the afterlife, it's all the same. They say it's the eternal unfolding of now, or instantly being aware of eternity. They say it's wonderful. So they have this life review. Now, some people go through highlights where others are taken through everything, every moment, everything they ever thought, said, felt, and did, with a difference. In this lifetime, you're one person, you. So you're seeing from your perspective, from your eyes, hearing with your ears, thinking with your thoughts. You're only you. In this life review, you become everybody you've ever interacted with, including animals. So you experience the thing again that happened, the event that happened from your perspective, and you're at the same time, you're experiencing it being the other person. And I'll give an example. This one guy was a kind of a bully in his life. And he was driving his truck and got into an altercation with a pedestrian who had illegal crossed the street in front of him. And he had to stop, and he got out of his truck and they got in a fight. And being a big, strong man, he beat this guy up, 34 blows. Well, there he was again in his life review, hitting the guy. And it's just as real as it is now, you and me talking, that real. At the same time, he was that man. He felt his nose break. He felt his teeth break. He felt every one of the 34 blows. He felt the embarrassment that guy had about being beat up in a fight and being left unconscious in the street. He felt the fear that guy felt, the uneasiness in public for a long time. There was another woman who, in the days before cell phones, she stopped to help a stranded motorist who was out in the cold. Now, I used to live back in Ohio. If you got stranded and nobody helped you, you could freeze to death. Every year, people would freeze to death. And so it would be worrying if something happened with your car and nobody stopped to help, you could die. And so this woman in her life review, she relived an incident she forgot about. She was on her way to work and there was a stranded motorist in the cold who needed a jump start. She stopped real quick and helped her jump start her car and ran off to work without even waiting to be thanked. And in her life review, she experienced it from the point of view of the woman who was stranded, who was getting really nervous and scared that nobody's coming to help me. Nobody cares. And all of a sudden, this angel shows up and helps her, Or you give a homeless man a meal, thinking nothing of it. And then in your life review, he hasn't eaten for 2 days, and you get to feel how good it is to eat when you haven't eaten for 2 days. And the life review is to teach us that it is so important the way we treat others. We are all connected. When you bring hope or joy to just one soul, millions receive the vibration. And when you harm one human being with your words or your actions, it harms the whole. What they are trying to teach us is the importance of love and how we treat each other, and how important it is to be considerate and kind and compassionate to others, especially when our ego tells us they don't deserve it. Now, I'll give you an example from the first NDE I ever heard, Howard Storm. Howard was going through his life review, and he was having a rough time because he was kind of a tyrant in his life. And when he was a teenager, he kind of gave up his spiritual religious views and became an atheist. And he was kind of a bad guy. He was one of these guys that, everybody's always afraid of. So Howard Storm was kind of one of these tyrants who would yell and scream at people and dominate, a room when he came into it and that kind of thing. And he was having a hard time in his life review. Well, he got to this one point in high school where he had won a shot put event, and they went right by it. They didn't say anything. And he said, "Hey, I worked really hard to win that shot put event, and you guys didn't say anything. You just kind of skipped right over it." And the angels who were with him said, "Well, you did that for you, and then that's okay, but let us show you the really important part of that whole thing." And they rewound the tape. And there was this one part where, he's there practicing his shot put, and this kind of unpopular, uncoordinated kid who was a little heavy set came along. He says, "Oh, I want to learn the shot put. Can you help me?" And Howard stopped what he was doing, and he spent some time with this kid and really helped him and showed him the ropes. And the angel said, "You see that? That's the stuff we're really impressed with. That's what we like." So the life review is to teach us that we're all connected, and we really need to think about the way we treat other people, even the way we greet people. Hearing these testimonies changed the way I behave. I used to have my bad days where I go out in public, and you go up to the bank, "I'm here to withdraw $400. "Okay, thank you very much." I don't do that anymore. Even if I'm in a bad mood, I'll smile and say, "Hey, how you doing today? I noticed you're always working real hard. I appreciate that," And you just try, and every little thing you can do, whether it's saying please or thank you or holding the door open for somebody, or even as simple as picking up a piece of trash in public. When you do that, Mother Earth, she knows. She knows you're taking care of her. Mother Earth has an intelligent, she's an intelligent being inhabiting the physical body of Earth, and just like we're intelligent. And she sees that, and that's a display of love. Just like, when you say to your mom, "Oh, your collar, let me straighten your collar there." It's just a little display of love. So every little thing, whether it's even towards an animal, people in their life reviews were shown that, like one girl, she tied a ribbon around her dog's neck and it was too tight. And in her life review, she felt how that was uncomfortable for the dog, And so even the way we treat animals is important. One guy in his life review, they got to a part where they lived on a farm at that time in his life, and this stray cat showed up that was on the brink of starvation. And, they had a bunch of other animals on this farm, and they, brought the cat in and adopted it and fed it and became a member of the family. And you didn't think much of it. In his life review, he saw it from the cat's perspective. This cat's on the brink of starvation and doesn't have a friend in the world, and his family comes in and adopts it and feeds it and is my friends now. And, he experienced it. So it's just so important the way we treat every living thing. And that even applies to nature, So they'll have this life review. Some of them are told that their work is finished and they can stay if they want. Others are told, it's not your time, you have to go back. The ones who are told you can stay if you'd like because you've finished your work, you've accomplished your task, but you can go back and do more. Well, if I heard their testimony, they came back. So our guides or God or whoever they're with over there, they're very smart, right? So they'll show the soul, this is the benefits to humanity if you go back and do more of your human work. And of course, a lot of them at that point, say, "Well, I've got to go back." Now, they don't want to come back. It's heaven is the most exciting, beautiful, wonderful, amazing place in the whole world. Everybody who's there wants to stay there forever. I mean, you can't even describe the colors of heaven. So when I first started hearing these near-death experiences, people would say, I saw colors that don't exist in this world. And I said, "Well, what colors?" And I said, "Well, I can't tell you. They don't exist in this world." Well, finally, one guy, he says, we have three primary colors, right? Red, blue, and yellow, and a mixture of those three colors make up all the colors of the rainbow from those three primary colors. There are over 80 primary colors in heaven. So just the colors are mind-boggling. And they have environments that are set up kind of like Earth, where there's trees and rivers and mountains and waterfalls and cities, but everything's beautiful beyond belief. There are flowers that grow with their own light, that glow with their own light and sing. And you can communicate with plants and animals. One guy said he saw a bunch of kids playing with a big lion like it was a domesticated cat. So there's all these amazing things in heaven. People want to stay there. And they don't want to come back because compared to heaven, this is kind of a hellish environment. There's a lot of negativity here, but there's a purpose to all this. And near-death experiences are shown that, this planet, even though there's a lot of negativity here and chaos and fear and suffering and abuse, you get people being very abusive with each other. It's a hostile environment. As a matter of fact, some have been told that Earth is the most difficult planet in the entire galaxy to incarnate into. It's one of the most difficult in our entire universe. So only advanced souls come here. So, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL. You're like the best of the best in terms of souls. So when I do my spiritual counseling and people say, I'm having such a hard time. Well, yeah, you took on the Mount Everest of physical incarnations. Of course, you're going to have a hard time. There's suffering down here. So yeah, people don't want to come back, but we learn so much down here, right? When you're not stressing yourself, if you're sitting at home in your living room and you have a luxury house with all the comforts and conveniences, you're not really going to grow or change. But if you're put into an environment where you're stressed and when you're struggling to survive, that's when you're going to change and grow and learn. So we come into this harsh environment. Advanced souls come here because it's like the fast track learning of a soul. It's something we apply for, and not everybody is qualified to come down here. And so if you're here, pat yourself on the back because you've made it to one of the toughest places. And even if you're having a tough time in this life, you're doing well just coming here to Earth. That was an amazing feat right there. So cut yourself some slack. So in any case, they come back, and they come back very quickly. Some of them feel like a thud or a slam coming back into their body. They don't like the feeling of gravity. In the afterlife, you're kind of weightless, and they don't like the heavy feeling of gravity. They say it's like being back in their body is like being having an old, restrictive, heavy winter coat on. It doesn't feel good. And of course, if they were in an accident or in the hospital, all the pain comes back. When you come out of your body, you are feeling quite young and energetic and pain-free. One 7-year-old girl, she was being guided through the tunnel towards the light by her brother who had died in the Vietnam War, and she had died at 7 years old of a fever. And there were other people in the tunnle with her. She saw these people, and some of them had this calm excitement like she had, and others were kind of like dancing almost, like wah, like really excited. And she said to her brother, "What's up with those guys? Why are they so crazily excited?" And her brother said, "Oh, those are elderly people who have been trapped for years in broken down, painful bodies, and they're overjoyed to be young and healthy again." So coming back here is tough, right? It's tough physically, and it's tough to leave that perfect love. And some people, when they come back, they get depressed for years. Some try and commit suicide, only to be told, you are not to decide when you die. It's the only time you hear the being of light speak harshly, when somebody commits suicide. That's a big no-no in the afterlife. So they come back, and their lives are generally transformed. Whatever they had been chasing previously, whether it was money or career or a certain hobby, that generally goes away. And what they tend to focus on from that point forward in their life is service to humanity and meaningful relationships. Yeah. So they become less materialistic, more altruistic. They will often change careers. One man who was a billionaire came back, and he was shown in heaven. You were given this set of talents. This was Gordon Allen. He was a billionaire, and it wasn't to make money. So when he came back, he gave up all his ties to the financial industry and became a marriage and family counselor. And his story was kind of interesting because he was this financial shark. He'd call people up, and they knew the hit was coming, right? What's Gordon going to hit me up for now, right? And he said when he came back, he called up his old work associates and so forth. Some of them who he had really screwed over. This is Gordon Allen. Oh yeah, well, what can I do for you? They're getting ready, like what's coming now. And he says, well, I haven't really treated you very compassionately. I haven't treated you with kindness and consideration for you and your needs. And I just wanted to apologize for that. And so their personalities change completely, and it shocks people. Sometimes the marriage can suffer because of that. So one man who was a businessman, rather wealthy, and his wife and him were both very materialistic. When he came back, he didn't care about that anymore. He wanted to do service to humanity, and he changed his friends and his focus and everything. And his wife, got very upset that he wasn't, didn't want to have nice things anymore, like super nice luxury things anymore. And so divorce is quite common. Now, if the marriage does survive, it continues in a completely different way because the person has changed so much. They tend to have a lot less fear. A lot of us here on planet Earth, us human beings, we're always nervous about doing things or making a big life change. And near-death experiences, when they come back, they tend to just roll the dice and take chances. They tend to just take a lot more risks in life. They tend to be more focused on the moment. A lot of us down here, we're fretting about what happened yesterday or worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. And having an afterlife experience kind of tends to get people to focus on the beauty of the moment, right? You can't get hung up on where you'd rather be that you forget to make the most of where you are. So they tend to really focus on the moment and the people around them. And they become much more kind, loving, and compassionate people. And it's really a transformative experience. So even people who do nothing more than study near-death experiences tend to have these positive changes in their lives. I can't tell you how many changes it made in my life. I was kind of a ruthless person before. If somebody did something to me that they really wronged me, I got revenge. I was patient and I got revenge. Well, I learned from near-death experiences, there's no such thing as revenge. Whatever pain I cause another person, no matter how justified it is, I'm going to feel that pain in my life review. So a lot of times now I let stuff go. When you get to a certain point spiritually, you don't want to do that. It's not even a struggle. It's just, somebody's having a bad day. Somebody's yelling at me or being cruel or whatever, and I just kind of feel bad. What can I do to make them feel better? And it's a lot easier for me to be calm. So it's really enriched my life in many ways. And I'm grateful for all the people out there. And even people like you who have shared your out-of-body experiences, which are very similar, have many of the common elements of near-death experiences. Listening to those experiences is transformative. So I'm grateful for all the brave souls out there who didn't worry about, people thinking they're going to be crazy by telling their stories. And I'm grateful for everyone out there who's shared their experiences, because it's really helped my life and the lives of a lot of other people as well.
Are there any ways to clear those bad or negative experiences of how you treated others here on Earth without having to experience them in the life review?
Well, that's a good question. I think simply knowing that we're all connected will help. I don't know of a specific method for clearing them, but I do know that when one is consciously aware that when you harm another person, it harms everyone. And when you help another person, it helps everyone. That kind of changes the way you interact. If everybody on Earth was in heaven for just 3 seconds and experienced a common connection, 3 seconds, and came, of course, there's no time over there, but just an instantaneous moment and came back, the first thing that would happen when they came back is the people in society who have been forgotten and abandoned, the elderly, homeless people who are mentally ill and drug addicts, they would be swarmed. with love and compassion, because that's low-hanging fruit. To take a very wealthy businessman who's focused on materialistic pursuits and try and convince him of the value of meaningful relationships and love and charity and service to humanity, that's a tough job. That's a lot of work. It doesn't take much work to really encourage a soul who's lost. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort or money to help those people, So just sort of a knowledge of the fact that we're all connected, I think, is beneficial in the way we treat each other. And we're going to be aware of this someday. We're going to be very aware of it someday. And now some people are naturally aware of it. Some people are psychic empaths. They can really feel when another person is hurting. And I started developing empathic abilities when I started studying near-death experiences. So I would feel the pain of other people. And sometimes I even get flashes of what's going on in their life. And I used to, when it first started happening, I remember one of the guys I interviewed, he had a 6-hour near-death, it was a 6-hour interview for his near-death experience. He had a very extensive experience in heaven. And when I was interviewing him, he said, "Oh, you're going to develop psychic abilities." Now, I'm a retired engineer. I didn't believe in that stuff. I laughed at him, right? And then it started happening. And when it first started happening, I would blurt it out. I told a waitress in a restaurant, I said, "Oh, you're pregnant." She thought I was spying on her or something, right? So I learned to not tell them that, so, and it's amazing. People don't question what they should question. Like, they don't say, "Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense." So an example would be, I was in the grocery store, and this cashier looked really stressed. She's working hard. She looked really stressed. I'd seen her in there before. And I thought, I wonder what's going on with her. And the minute I thought that, I was getting flashes of what happened. Her boss was yelling at her first thing in the morning about some trivial thing. And this was a habit that he had. And I was seeing all this. And I didn't tell her, I'm psychic and I'm seeing these things. I said to her, "You look like you're kind of having a hard day. Let me guess. Boss was yelling at you for some trivial thing that wasn't your fault first thing in the morning." And she says, "Yeah, And I just gave her a little encouraging word. And I learned that from the fact that we're all connected. If you brighten somebody's day, you help yourself, right? So we can't break that common connection. We have the illusion of separateness down here, which is needed for the growth experience. But it is only an illusion. We are not separate. We are far more connected than separate. And I guess that's the only piece of advice I have to help sort of heal the way we treat other people. And, forgive yourself. If you've been cruel or selfish to other people, we're not perfect. I would have to call you God instead of Witty, right? If you were perfect. So, cut yourself some slack. They know on the other side of the veil that we're going to make a lot of mistakes down here. It's a very cruel, harsh environment. We're dealing with this love-fear duality. And we're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. That, they understand that. They don't hold that against us. We have this idea down here on earth that if you sin, there's a punishment. Well, that's a human concept. Okay. They don't have that. The creative, benevolent, loving source of all that is that we're a part of does not have anger, does not have judgment, doesn't even have expectation. It has hopes. They hope that we make choices to have a good life and a good learning experience down here, but they don't have judgment. There's an unconditional love. There's nothing at all, no matter how bad a human being behaves, there's nothing you can do to make the all-powerful creator like you one bit less. He adores you. Just like, you ever see a mother that just adores her little 5-year-old child who's just a nightmare and out of control and rambunctious and causing all that, but she just sees him she just adores the child. This is my beautiful child. He can do no wrong. That's how God feels about us. Cut yourself some slack if you behaved badly and made some mistakes. We're human down here. We're pretending to be human, and that's part of the experience.
What are some of the new abilities most NDEs come back with?
Oh, they come back with a lot of enhanced abilities. It's very common for them to come back with psychic abilities or empathic abilities. That some come back with musical talents. One man, Frederick De La Rue, I got to spend a good afternoon with him out in Palm Springs, and he told me all about his near-death experience when he was 11 years old in a car accident. He came back and he said he heard music from heaven, and he would write the best, copy of it that he could for down here. Now, people have heard about the music in heaven, right? Some people have heard the music. Don Piper's book, 90 Minutes in Heaven, he talks about the music of heaven. I put a quote from his book about the music in my book. So if you get a copy of my book, a PDF that I'll email you, you can read that. But the music is amazing. They say our best music sounds like a child hitting on a pan with a stick. They come back, some of them with healing abilities. Some people work with, chakras or energies, or some come back and they see spirits or can see auras. I myself have seen auras on occasion, but a lot of these people, they see them all the time. So yeah, they come back with these special healing psychic abilities, and some of them make a living as channelers. Some of them channel. One good friend of mine, Tamara Richardson, she's got a show called Seeking Heaven. She will channel people, and I watched her have a guest on, and this woman had lost her autistic son who died as a teenager, and she was very upset about it. And she channeled and communicated with the son and said all this really specific information that there was no way you could guess it, right down to the kind of toys he had and what he liked to play with and all that, and his personality. And so this woman had no doubt that this channeler who was talking with her dead son was legit. And you could see her face change from this just depressed, dejected, to overwhelming happiness and tears of joy that her son is alive and well, and she's going to see him again someday. And they come back with talents really to serve humanity. I mean, even with mine, I never had a near-death experience or even an out-of-body experience, but I did develop psychic abilities. It's never anything for me. I never get tomorrow's lottery numbers or which stocks are going to go up. I would like that, right? It's always something to help another person. And so they're given these gifts to really help humanity in a way. And it's difficult for some of them. It takes some time adjusting. The first near-death experience I ever heard, Howard Storm, I read his book, and he said it was not too long after his near-death experience, he was seeing spirits everywhere. And, he had been an atheist. And he told his wife, well, I want to go to church. So they walk in this big church, and there's a few thousand people in the congregation. And he looks up, and there's several hundred luminous orbs of energy, angels, very similar to what he saw in heaven. And he falls on his knees crying, oh, thank you, God. Oh, he's just so happy. And his wife is like, get up. What are you doing? You're embarrassing me. So yeah, they come back with all sorts of different talents and visions and abilities, and it's to help humanity.
Is our afterlife form based on our own earth consciousness of how we perceive ourselves? And then when we go over to the other side, that's our form over there?
Yes. So one of the things I learned very early on is that thoughts are things. So I would hear over and over again from the near-death experiencers, thoughts and words have power. And I didn't know what that meant, but it's basically creating with consciousness. Now, we do that here with our collective consciousness, but it's a very slow, long, drawn-out process. Well, over there, it's instantaneous. So if you think about an apple in your hand, an apple appears. Now, you can do that here. You can concentrate on having an apple, but it requires action. I got to go out and buy an apple, or go to the refrigerator and get an apple, right? So if somebody has an image of themselves, that's how they'll appear. Now, in the afterlife, I believe our natural form is what some people describe their experiences as, sort of this sphere of awareness and consciousness. Others have a body. Some are even dressed in the same clothes that they died in. And I've even heard testimonies where the person arrives in heaven and they're in their same body and same clothing, and they're confused. They don't know what's going on. They have a discussion with an angelic guide, and the guide explains it. And as that happens, they transform and they become young again. And I've even heard near-death experiences where There's certain realms where we do have a light body, and you can transform into the sphere of energy and then come back in a different form. So you can actually choose any kind of body you want. You can be male, you can be female, you can even appear as an animal. You can take on any form. But people who don't know they're dead or don't know what's going on will typically, from their own consciousness, manifest a body that's got the same basic structure and clothing they had when they died.
Do you fear death?
If somebody points a gun at my head, I'm not afraid at all. If somebody points a gun at my stomach, I'm terrified because it's going to hurt like hell and I'm going to survive, right? So yeah, no, I'm not afraid of death. Death is no different than waking up from a dream. You know, when you're dreaming, you believe that your dream world is real, and you believe that you are a victim of whatever is happening. And in reality, you're creating the experience and experiencing it simultaneously. And when you wake up and you find yourself in the real world, that dream world disappears. Now, you don't say, I died and I'm in the real world now. You go, oh, that dream was just this dream I had. And many near-death experiencers say that. They say the life on earth is similar to a dream. When you're in the afterlife, the common thing is they say, I felt more real and more alive than I've ever felt on earth. Is this the height of reality, filled up with life? And by comparison, that life down on earth was very disjointed, very unclear, foggy. Yeah, so it's like waking up from a dream. It's an easy thing, and it's a wonderful experience. Now, the process of dying itself, if you've been injured in a horrible accident or die in a fire or something like that, can be very unpleasant. But the coming out of the body is a wonderful thing. It's like taking off that old, heavy, restrictive winter coat. Some people describe it like one guy said, it was if I was an Eskimo my entire life, and I lived out in the cold and was cold my entire life and didn't even know I was cold because it's the only thing I ever experienced. And all of a sudden I'm on a tropical island and I'm warm and comfortable for the first time in my life, So no, afraid of death, not at all.
What has been the most remarkable NDE testimonies you've heard about?
The most remarkable ones? Well, that first one I heard, Howard Storm's testimony, was remarkable to me. And what was remarkable about it, and what really hit me, is this man was an atheist and kind of a tyrant. And at the time I heard it, I had this idea in my head, as I had mentioned earlier, that I was a bad Christian. God didn't care about me. I was the son that was out of his favor, that he's not going to talk to me, right? So when Howard Storm called out to help from the darkness and was rescued and was being brought towards heaven, he was being brought towards this world of light and love and goodness, and he saw it. And he started having feelings of tremendous shame because, he was thinking, I was so bad on earth. I behaved so badly. I'm garbage. I'm filth. They don't want me up there. And they stopped. And Jesus spoke to him. And he said, we don't make mistakes. You belong in heaven with us. And that really spoke to me, just because, we've got this idea down here that we got to earn God's love. And that's not the case. The Jesus I've learned about, and people have met many religious figures in the afterlife, Jesus, Buddha, all these religious figures, is not like what I was taught in school. He's really funny, first of all, and he's just like the neatest, coolest, wisest guy. He's like it's like talking to your best friend, So he's not this judgmental character that you get in religion. But so that was one experience that was really beautiful. Another one I really liked was Kathy Jordan's experience. She wrote a book called The Birth Called Death. And she had lots of visits to heaven. So she was the one who died of a fever in the tunnel, and she asked about what's up with those people dancing. That was her story. But after that, her brother came and took her on many trips to heaven, and she talked about her many visits and what it was like and so forth. And so those two were really amazing. But there are lots of amazing testimonies out there, very lengthy testimonies that just transform people's lives completely. To me, they're all amazing. Even the ones where the person just pops out of their body, the atheist who pops out of their body after an accident and is back in and says, that forever changed my life because I know there's more to me than just the physical body. I know we continue after death. So even just those are amazing to me.
Now, some have come back to Earth after having an NDE or OBE, and they've come back into depression. Are there any negative effects of coming back to Earth after having an NDE?
Oh, sure. Some people can become very depressed because after experiencing pure love and pure perfection and a joy and a happiness, it's the kind of love that people look for their whole lives and never really get. It's impossible to feel that love here. It's just not possible. And they experience it. And coming back here is really tough. And so that's one element. Some people are kind of lost between two worlds. One woman came back and she said, I was lying in bed for 3 days and everything was foreign to me. I didn't understand anything about the physical world. And then the first thing that got to her was the fact that, wait a minute, to survive in this world, I've got to make money. I've got to get out of this bed and go to work. And so some people have a real hard time adjusting in there. And what happens is when we come down here, there's a veil. There's a veil of amnesia, and there's a veil of an illusion of separateness and forgetfulness. Well, those who have near-death experiences, that veil becomes more transparent, right? And it can be difficult for some of them. Some of my clients that I do the spiritual counseling for have a hard time because, they don't want to be seeing these spirits and various things, and getting psychic flashes. It really bothers some people. And it takes some time for them to get used to their talents. The guy who told me I was going to develop psychic abilities, he said the very first thing that happened when he came back is he was in a grocery store and there was this woman who was shopping, and he looked at her and he had this vision of a ring sitting in this dusty area, this dusty, dark area. And there was like this grating with light coming through. And he thought, that looks like underneath a refrigerator. And, he's all nervous. He doesn't know, is this real or what? So he walks up to the woman and he says, well, this is what I'm seeing. And she doesn't say anything to him. She takes the phone out of her purse and calls her daughter and says, can you check under the fridge? And then he sees her face change and she starts to cry. And she says, my mother died recently. And I was really upset with myself for losing her wedding ring. And I don't know who you are or how you knew that, but thank you. So people there's an adjustment period, but most of them adjust with some very positive effects. Some who have particularly difficult lives try to commit suicide. Many long to go back to that light, but most of them, they're transformed for the better down here. Yeah, it makes life more difficult, but better.
Now, I feel that we all have our own journey here on Earth. And do you feel there is a general purpose here on Earth for all of us, though, like to become more loving, less materialistic? What do you think is our general purpose here as humanity?
Oh, sure. It's an experiential learning. So there is a general purpose, and you hit the nail on the head. It's all about love. So I'm not a Christian, but there are many truths contained within many religions. If I had to say what mix I am, I would say I'm 1/3 Christian, 1/3 Buddhist, and 1/3 Quaker. So the purpose of life is to learn about love. Now, when you're in a really good mood, if you ever go to one of these raves and there's these young kids and they're taking ecstasy, which makes all the dopamine and serotonin get released at once in your body, and they're just in the best moods. I mean, you can yell at them and it doesn't faze them. They're just in the best mood ever. When you're in a good mood, it's easy to be kind and loving to others, right? Easy. What about when you're having a bad day or when you're in a hostile environment? Now, how easy is it? And just like a weightlifter, if I do curls with 5-pound dumbbells, that's easy. I can do that all day long. I don't grow. I got to put 35-pound dumbbells. I got to stress my muscles to grow. So we really don't learn anything down here intellectually, because on the other side of the veil, you're connected to universal consciousness. You have all the answers, but we have an experiential learning. We experience this love-fear duality. And within this hostile environment where there's fear and pain and chaos and suffering, we have to learn to love in the worst of circumstances. And that strengthens our spiritual muscle. And so we get a boost in consciousness that is not possible in the perfection of the afterlife. And so these physical lives that are done all throughout the universe is full of life. That's something many near-death experiencers say. And there are countless other dimensions, all containing their own universes that are also full of life. These physical incarnations are part of the engine of growth of the fractal of God. It's like the leaves on the tree. You know, that's where the growth is. The new growth is on the outside of that tree. And maybe you could think of God like the trunk. And we're all sort of like one big unit, but that's where the growth is happening. So even though they're very difficult, especially when you choose a planet like this, they're necessary for the advancement of consciousness, for the fractal of God becoming more, not complex, more intricate, more elaborate and developed. It's how God grows.
Now, humanity seems to be currently going through an awakening. I've come across a lot of people who are now connecting back to this God consciousness or this consciousness of enlightenment and awakening from the amnesia. What's your thoughts on this awakening at this current moment?
For a long time, there has been a paradigm in our worldwide consciousness, and that paradigm is to fight and compete to survive. If I am going to survive, I must growl and snarl and bite anyone who threatens me. And if I'm strong enough, maybe even take their food away and take their resources. Yeah, that's been the old paradigm. And there's been a paradigm of command and control. A battle happens, and there's an alpha male, an alpha figure. Now, it used to be the right to rule by divine right. You know, the King Arthur, you know, the Lady of the Lake gave me Excalibur and signified by divine right that I am to carry Excalibur and to be the ruler. Well, we gave that up, but we haven't given up the idea of the divine right to rule by politicians or leaders. And they, in general, are in it for themselves. They generally don't have the best interest of humanity in mind. So there is a new paradigm, and we are becoming aware of it. So this new paradigm is there because we're in a new place in space. We're in what some call the Great Awakening, and we're moving into a new consciousness. And that consciousness is one of fighting to survive, survival mode, where you're only thinking about yourself and your own survival, to a higher consciousness, an awareness of the connection of all living things. Human beings, animals, plants, the earth. Yes. And so in this new paradigm, the new paradigm is we're going to cooperate now instead of compete. And cooperating is so much more powerful. Think about Apple and Samsung, you know, the two big smartphone manufacturers, and they're always at each other's throats, suing each other. Imagine if those two companies got together and said, we're still going to make our own phones using our own ideas and technology, but you know what? We're going to share all our technology. And, you know, each one can use the other's ideas as they see fit. You would have both companies producing much better phones and probably cheaper. So cooperation is extremely powerful with mankind's ability to mass manufacture, with our technology and our capabilities to manifest our physical requirements, food, clothing, housing, medical care. The new paradigm is this: there is enough for everyone. We don't need to compete anymore. It's time to drop the old ideas of command and control. Command and control will be replaced by communities. Corporations will be run by co-ops. It's already starting. There's a co-op now in the Fortune 100, I think, a French company, a huge company, very successful. And we're really going to We're at the very beginnings of loving the world into the paradise it was always meant to be in the first place. Now, this is not going to come gracefully. Okay, the corporate government banking oligarchy that is running the world is not going to give up their power easily. They're going to get dragged into higher consciousness along with the rest of humanity, whether they like it or not. And when they do get dragged into it, they're going to go, oh, this is a lot better. But I mean, they have this fear that if we're not controlling everybody else, we're not going to feel happy and fulfilled. Right. And it's not, they're not giving up the power gracefully. So what we're seeing right now is old systems failing. Our systems that have served us for so many years are crumbling. And every big system, whether it's banking or multinational corporations or government or politics or whatever, it's either going to change to meet the new paradigm or it's going to fail. Now, near-death experiencers have been shown this future Earth. There's no set timeline, depends on how fast we want to go, but within 150 years, it's pretty much going to be a paradise compared to the way it is now. It's going to be very different. There's going to be very few material possessions. People are going to live in small communities of around 100 to 150 people. There'll be technology. We'll have amazing technology, but we won't be that dependent on it because biology is the best technology. So, for instance, when somebody gets sick, the rest of the community will go around them and with prayer and consciousness heal them, right? And we'll have psychic relationships, psychic communication, and friendships with intelligent beings on other planets. So the whole change, though, is going to be difficult, you know? It's like I knocked down a wasp nest hanging from my garage, big old wasp nest. I won the battle. Their home was destroyed, but they were not going down without a fight. They were mad as hell, and they stung me, you know, they bit me. So the powers that be have lost. You know, they want this new world order where they're kind of the command and control, and they're like the pharaohs of old. They feel like they're born to rule, and the rest of us will be kind of a slave class. That's kind of what they want. And, you know, monitoring of everything, and they wanted to integrate, you know, technology, microchips in our brain to control us, and all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, that's all real. They want to do that. They're not shy about their plans either. I mean, the Georgia Guidestones, which aren't too far from where I live, I mean, they spell it out what they want to do, reduce the world population, you know, all this stuff. But they're going to fail. And so there's going to be some turmoil in the change. And what I like to tell people is when you see the chaos in the world and you take a look around at the world today, and it doesn't seem like we're headed towards a utopian society. It seems like everything's falling apart, right? That's because when you have a giant mansion and it's served your family for generations. It's been in your family for hundreds and hundreds of years. But now the wood is rotten and the roof is leaking and the plumbing is bad and the electricity is faulty and it's falling apart and you just can't patch it up anymore. The day the bulldozers come and knock it down so that you can build a better house and a newer house and one that works good for you, the day you're watching the house get knocked down and you're standing there in the street and looking at the house and saying, well, I got no place to live. Now what? It seems like the end of the world. It's not. It's only a step to where we want to be. The dance of consciousness is always one of two steps forward and one step back. And we're in a one step back phase right now. So I like to quote an entity named Cryon that Lee Carroll channels. He said, keep this acronym in your mind for the near, for the future. Suck. Slow, uncomfortable change. So that's what we're going to be experiencing for a while. And I like to tell people, just realize it's all part of bringing humanity to a higher consciousness. I've been told many times we were headed towards self-destruction. We were headed towards Armageddon, but it was averted thanks to a lot of help from above. And now the race has been won. The game is over. It's only a matter of the plan working itself out. So there's going to be a great awakening of consciousness. And as this happens, people are going to demand integrity in business and government. And they're going to start treating each other like they matter. And that's going to really change things. And there's going to be lots of cool stuff, the news. My God, it's a well-crafted fear report. It's negative story after negative. If you did nothing but watch the news, you'd think the world's falling apart. Well, it's starting already. I like to watch the Good News Network. They got a channel on YouTube. They got an internet site, and it's all good news. When we start doing things like that, report good news, you know what that's going to do? Whatever we focus on, that's what we create more of. We stop focusing on negative, we start focusing on positive. My God, when the ball gets rolling in the right direction, it's really going to get going. And the way I've heard it described is if an alien came here to this planet and looked at it today, they would look around and go, oh my God, these people are messed up. They've trashed their environment. They're fighting each other. They're all screwed up. They ain't going to make it. They're going to extinguish themselves. And if they came back 150 years later, jaw would drop. What did these people do? How did they clean up their act? Look at, they made a paradise of this place so fast. How did they do that? My God. And that's human beings. We are different than a lot of other species in our galaxy because we change quickly. That's our blessing. So we'll look like we're going to really screw things up. And, the aliens are kind of watching us, because they want us to be a member of the galactic community eventually when we're ready. These guys are really messing things up. And all of a sudden we turn around, Russia and the United States, nuclear weapons, just ready to push the button. We had the consciousness to do it. We had the politicians who hated each other on both sides. And what happened? All of a sudden, no, let's disarm. We're not going to do that. So we confound them by all of a sudden changing. So that's our big forte. We've done it. And we're going to make it to being an ascended species. And we're going to be living in a future Earth in harmony and peace. And don't worry, guys. Don't worry if you're my age in your 50s. You're not going to miss it. You're not going to miss the grand finale. If you've incarnated in all these lifetimes, helping work to make Earth this paradise, you're not going to miss the grand finale. You're going to incarnate here again and come back and be part of it all. So, don't worry about missing the party. You'll be here for it.
Okay, so can you tell us about what the main point is in your book?
The book is, if you've had a near-death experience or you've been into the world of New Age spirituality for a long time, you, Whitty, you have over 500 videos on your channel. If you read my book, it's going to be spirituality 101 for you. It's like a beginner thing. But, if you're in a point where you're lost faith in religion, but you still kind of believe that there's an afterlife and a God, and you kind of want to know, what's really going on. It's really just kind of an overview of the lessons that near-death experiencers teach us. So there's a chapter on heaven, there's a chapter on hell, there's a chapter on coming back to Earth, there's a chapter on love, about the new world of love and what's coming, competition versus cooperation, and just kind of the nature of who we are and what we're doing on this planet and our role here in creation. So yeah, it's just a 101 of the basics of who we are from a spiritual perspective.
Are there any upcoming events, projects, or anything you're working on you want to share with us?
I am working on a second book called The New World of Love, where I'm going to be describing sort of the process of how we're going to be getting to that utopian society that I talked about. So that's coming out in a couple of years. I do enjoy doing spiritual counseling. And, as I mentioned before, we're all connected. We're here for each other's encouragement, understanding, and love. And I do some consulting on power plants, which was my old job as an engineer. So that's where I kind of make my money. And so for those who are on a budget, if they can't afford to pay for spiritual counseling, I have certain slots of free sessions. So if somebody's going through a spiritual awakening or has questions, they can go to my website, God Took My Clothes, and click on the spiritual counseling link. And there's my phone number and email are there, and they can contact me and get some spiritual counseling. I may be going to the International Association of Near-Death Experience Studies coming up in September in Salt Lake City. I haven't decided yet, but there's open registration for anybody who's interested. It's a 3-day conference in Salt Lake City, and there's some very well-known near-death experience testimonies they're going to have out there for those interested. So you can go to iands.com, iands.com, if you're interested in that.
Great. And do you reach out and respond to people? And if so, what other avenues are best for people to reach out back to you?
Oh, well, my email and phone are both good ways. Probably email's best, and just be patient. Sometimes I do get a little flooded, but I always answer every email. I don't ghost people. I'm not so busy right now that that I can't answer my emails. I hope to be that busy someday. My book only came out March of last year, and it's been getting busier and busier as time goes on. But right now, I'm still able to answer all my emails and phone calls. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And what I tend to do, just to save time, if the reason I prefer an email is often I just can't answer the phone because I'm in the middle of something else. But if you send me an email, I'll respond with an audio file. So just ask your questions or tell me about what you're going through or what you want to learn about, and I'll send you an audio file that you can listen to. And if you want a spiritual counseling session, we can set that up as well.
Now, can you give us one last positive message out there?
One last positive message. I would say, don't watch the news. Don't pay attention to the rest of the world. Where does it end? Someday we're going to have communication with other planets. Are we going to take on all the negativity of an entire galaxy? The human consciousness, the human mind and heart was not meant to take on the chaos and the drama and the suffering of an entire world. And when you watch the news, that's what happens. So my best advice to anybody who's looking to evolve spiritually is turn off the news. It's just a well-crafted fear report. Don't pay attention to the rest of the world. Just pay attention to your world, the people you run into on a daily basis, and do your best to be loving and kind and compassionate and understanding and forgiving. And the days that you're not, that's okay too, and know that no matter what happens, no matter how bad it seems like things are, or how miserable life can be sometimes, that we're always loved, cared for, and protected. Even though it feels like we're alone down here, we're never alone for one moment, and our future is bright. Whether your life here is good or bad or somewhere in the middle, someday, many years from now, when you leave and you're going to get to the afterlife, you're going to look back on your earthly life and you're going to say, wow, that was an incredibly difficult experience, but it was also amazing. I learned so much and I had such a good time. I want to do that again. Make the most of each day. This is a blessing to have these lives. Make the most of each day. Love yourself, love others, take chances, roll the dice. Don't do things you don't really feel like doing. Some people say treat every day like it's the last day of your life. Well, no, don't give away all your stuff and say goodbye to your family and friends, but treat every day like it's special, because it is. And you're special. I've been told by near-death experiencers that if just one soul, just one little part of creation were to cease to exist, the whole machine would stop. Now, that's impossible, but that's how important you are. So yeah, you're important. You are more than what you have been led to believe you are. You are pure love. You are pure energy of the divine creator, pretending to be imperfect, pretending to be human. That's who we are.
Awesome. Thank you very much. You've been a fantastic guest today on the show, and you're welcome to come back anytime. I'd love to do some more podcasts with you. And I usually say, have a great life, not just a great day.
You have a great life as well. It was a pleasure being on the show, Woody. Thank you so much.